My name is Sutton Fairley, and I'm 23 years old. I save lives for a living. I sit in a windowless room at the Knox County 911 Center, and I answer calls from people who are bleeding, choking, seizing, drowning, burning. I tell them to stay calm. I tell them help is coming. I keep them alive with my voice until the paramedics arrive. 3 months ago, I found out I was dead. Not sick, not missing, dead. Legally, officially, on paper, dead. A death certificate filed in Bledsoe County, Tennessee with my full name, my social security number, and a date of death I was very much alive for. My parents, both of them together, had declared me dead, collected $175,000 in life insurance money, held a memorial service, accepted condolences from the community, and moved on with their lives. All while I was sitting in a dispatch center 45 minutes away, answering 911 calls and paying taxes under the social security number they'd told the state of Tennessee belonged to a corpse. But here's what my parents didn't plan for. They didn't plan for me to walk into the courtroom during their fraud hearing. They didn't plan for the judge to look up from the bench and see the dead woman standing in the gallery. And they definitely didn't plan for me to speak. If you've ever felt like your own family saw you as a line item instead of a person, like your value was measured in what could be extracted from you, not what you meant to them, this story is going to burn. Hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments, what's the worst thing someone did to you for the money? I want to hear it. Let me take you back. Before the courtroom. Before the death certificate. Back to the one day my father treated me like a daughter instead of an asset. I grew up in Pikeville, Tennessee, a small town in Bledsoe County, about 90 minutes southeast of Knoxville. Population barely over 2,000. The kind of place where everyone goes to the same church, shops at the same Dollar General, and knows your family's business before you do. Our house was a single-story ranch on Dayton Avenue, tan siding, brown roof, a gravel driveway that crunched under tires in a way I can still hear when I close my eyes. My father, Dale Fairley, managed a used car lot called Fairley Motors on Main Street. It wasn't his. It belonged to a man named Gus Pritchard, who lived in Chattanooga and visited twice a year. But Dale ran it like it was his own kingdom. He knew every vehicle on the lot, every margin on every sale, every trick for making a car with 160,000 miles look like it had 80. He was charming with customers. Easy smile, firm handshake, the kind of man who could sell you a car you didn't need and make you feel like you owed him a favor. At home, that charm had a different function. It was a tool for management. Dale didn't parent, he administered. Everything was a transaction. If I cleaned the kitchen, I earned television time. If I made the honor roll, I earned a trip to Dairy Queen. If I didn't perform, I didn't earn. Love in our house wasn't given. It was invoiced. My mother, Noreen, was the bookkeeper of the operation. Not just literally, though she did keep the books for the car lot on weekends. She was the emotional bookkeeper. She tracked who owed what to whom. She remembered every sacrifice she'd made and presented the receipts at strategic moments. I gave up a promotion for you kids. I could have gone back to school, but I stayed home. Your father and I have given you everything, and this is how you repay us? I have a younger brother, Cody, 3 years behind me. Cody was the golden child, not because he was better, but because he was easier. He didn't question. He didn't push back. He absorbed whatever Dale and Noreen gave him and reflected it back like a mirror. By the time I left home, Cody had become a smaller version of Dale. Same easy smile, same transactional logic, same inability to distinguish between love and leverage. The Dollywood trip happened when I was 8. It's the only purely good memory I have of my father, and I've turned it over so many times in my mind that the edges are worn smooth like a river stone. Dale took me alone, just the two of us, a Saturday in October. He said it was a daddy-daughter day, a phrase he used exactly once in my life. We drove 2 hours to Pigeon Forge, listened to country radio, and he let me pick the stations without complaining. He bought me a funnel cake. He rode the scrambler with me twice, even though he said it made him dizzy. He laughed. A real laugh, not the customer laugh. when I screamed on the mountain sidewinder. At the end of the day, we passed a pressed penny machine near the exit, the kind where you put in a penny and 2 quarters and turn the crank, and the machine flattens the penny and stamps a design on it. In this case, a little butterfly with Dollywood written underneath. "Can I get one?" I asked. Dale reached into his pocket, pulled out a penny and 2 quarters, and handed them to me. "Go ahead. Something to remember the day." I turned the crank. The penny came out flat and warm and shiny, the butterfly pressed into the copper. I held it in my palm and looked up at my father, and he was smiling. Not the sales smile, the real one. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt like his daughter instead of his dependent. I kept that penny in my wallet for 11 years. Through elementary school, middle school, high school. Through the fights and the silence and the slow, grinding realization that the man who gave me the penny and the man who managed me like an asset were the same person, and that the Dollywood version appeared only once and was never coming back. When I left home at 19, I left the penny behind, not by accident. I put it on the dresser in my childhood bedroom, face up, butterfly showing, and I walked out. I left it because I wanted to leave every part of that house behind, including the one good day, including the only evidence that my father had ever loved me for free. I didn't know that 5 months after I left, my parents would take out a life insurance policy on me. And I didn't know that 3 years after that, they'd file a death certificate with my name on it and collect the payout. But looking back, the signs were there. They were always there. I just didn't have the language for what I was living in. When I say my parents treated me like an asset, I don't mean it as a metaphor. I mean it literally, financially, with paperwork. When I was 16, Dale added me to the car lot's payroll. Not because I worked there, I didn't. He listed me as a part-time employee, clocked hours I never worked, and deposited the paychecks into an account I didn't have access to. I didn't know about this until later. When I was 17, Noreen claimed me as a dependent on their taxes, even though I was working part-time at a Subway on Walnut Street and filing my own return. The IRS flagged it. Noreen told me it was a computer error and handled it. What she actually did was have me sign a form I didn't read that allowed them to continue claiming me. When I was 18, I applied for financial aid for community college. I was denied. The reason? My parents' reported income was too high for need-based aid, but their actual income wasn't high. Dale had been inflating it on paper by running money through the car lot's books to qualify for business credit lines. His financial maneuvering made our family look wealthier than we were, which meant I didn't qualify for the help I needed. I found all this out in pieces, over months, the way you find water damage, not in a flood, but in slow stains that spread across the ceiling until one day you look up and realize the whole structure is compromised. The day I left, I was 19 years old. I had $412 in a checking account I'd opened at a different bank without telling my parents. I had a duffel bag with clothes, a phone charger, and my social security card. The one document I'd made sure to take from Noreen's filing cabinet. And I had a ride to Knoxville from a coworker at the Subway who was moving there for a warehouse job. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I walked out of the house on Dayton Avenue at 6 a.m. on a Sunday while my parents were asleep, and I didn't look back. I didn't call. I didn't write. I changed my phone number. I disappeared. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because 4 years later, my parents made sure I disappeared for real, on paper at least, and they got paid for it. The first year in Knoxville was survival. Not the cinematic kind, the kind where you eat ramen 4 nights a week and sleep on an air mattress in a studio apartment on Magnolia Avenue and count the days between paychecks the way a prisoner counts walls. I got a job at a call center within 2 weeks, customer service for a cable company. $8.50 an hour, 40 hours a week, headset on for 8-hour shifts listening to people yell about their internet speed. It wasn't dignified work, but it was mine. My paycheck, my account, my name on the lease. For the first time in my life, nothing I earned was being rerouted through someone else's spreadsheet. I didn't contact my parents, not once. I knew what no contact meant. I'd read about it on forums during late nights in high school, sitting on the bathroom floor with my phone angled away from the door, searching terms like financial abuse and parentification and when your family treats you like an investment. I'd learned that what was happening in my house had names, clinical, documented names, and I'd learned that the only reliable treatment was distance. Dale called my old phone number for about 3 weeks after I left. I know because my coworker, the one who drove me to Knoxville, told me later that Dale had contacted him twice asking where I was. My coworker said he didn't know. Dale stopped calling after that. Not because he was respecting my boundaries. Because Dale only pursued things that had a return on investment. A missing daughter who wasn't generating income or tax deductions wasn't worth the long-distance minutes. Noreen, to my knowledge, never tried to reach me at all. That told me everything I needed to know about which parent I was to her. Not a child, but a line item. And when the line item removed itself from the ledger simply adjusted. I built a life in Knoxville the way you build anything from the ground up. Slowly, unevenly, one piece at a time. After 8 months at the call center, I saw a posting for a trainee position at the Knox County 911 Center. The requirements were a high school diploma, a background check, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. I had the first two. The third one I'd been practicing since childhood. Staying calm while Dale calculated and Noreen kept score was the best emergency training I never asked for. I applied, I tested, I passed. I started training in February, and by that summer I was taking live calls. The first time I answered a 911 line and heard a woman on the other end say, "Please help me, someone's hurt," something clicked into place in my chest like a bone resetting. This was the job. Not because of the adrenaline, because of the function. Someone is in crisis, and I am the voice that stands between them and the worst outcome. I was good at standing between people and the worst outcome. I'd been doing it my whole life. Now I got paid for it. By 23, I had a 1-bedroom apartment on Western Avenue, a used Honda Civic I'd bought with cash, a cat named Dispatch that I'd adopted from a shelter on Broadway, and a credit score of 711 that I'd built from nothing. I was stable, quiet, content in the way that people who grew up in chaos are content. Not joyful, but relieved, safe. Then I applied for a new apartment, a bigger one, on the north side, with a second bedroom I was planning to use as an office. The landlord ran a background check and a credit screening. Standard procedure. He called me 2 days later. "Miss Fairley, I'm having trouble processing your application. Your social security number is flagged." Flagged how? It's showing as belonging to a deceased individual. I went to the Social Security Administration office on Gay Street the next morning. I sat in a plastic chair for 2 hours and 14 minutes before a clerk named Donna called my number. I handed her my ID, my Social Security card, and my birth certificate. The documents I carried everywhere because when you grow up in a house where paperwork is a weapon, you learn to keep your own arsenal. Donna typed, clicked, frowned, typed again. Then she looked at me over her glasses with an expression I couldn't read, confusion mixed with something that might have been pity. "Miss Fairley, according to our records, a death certificate was filed for you in Bledsoe County, Tennessee. Date of death, March 19th, 2023. Cause of death listed as accidental drowning." I was sitting in that office, breathing, blinking, my heart beating 68 times a minute. I know because I could feel every single one. And the United States government was telling me I had drowned 13 months ago. "That's not possible," I said. "I'm here. I'm alive." "I can see that, ma'am, but the filing is in the system. It was processed through the Bledsoe County Clerk's office. You'll need to petition to have it reversed." "Who filed it?" Donna hesitated. Then she turned the screen slightly so I could see it. The informant on the death certificate, the person who reported my death, was listed as Dale Fairley. Relationship to deceased. Father. My father had walked into a government office, signed a document stating his daughter was dead, and filed it with the state of Tennessee. My mother's name appeared on a supporting affidavit, Noreen Fairley, confirming the identity of the deceased. both of them, together. They'd killed me on paper the way they'd managed me in life, as a joint venture, a collaborative project, a business decision. I sat in my car in the parking garage of the Social Security office, and I called the one person I could think of who might know what to do. Not a friend, I didn't have many. Not a therapist, I couldn't afford one. I called the Knox County Legal Aid Office because a dispatcher I worked with had once mentioned that they helped people with identity issues. The receptionist transferred me to an attorney named Iris Chaplin. Legal Aid, this is Iris. My name is Sutton Fairley. I'm 23 years old. I'm alive, and my parents filed a death certificate in my name 13 months ago. Silence. 2 beats. Then Iris said, "Can you come in today?" "I can come right now." "Do that." Over the next 2 weeks, Iris and I reconstructed what had happened. The death certificate was filed in Bledsoe County in April of the previous year. The cause of death, accidental drowning, was supported by a brief report from a man named Harlan Creed, who was listed as the recovery witness. Harlan Creed was a fishing buddy of Dale's, a retired maintenance worker who lived outside Pikeville and who, Iris discovered through public records, had received a $9,000 payment from Dale's account 2 weeks after the death certificate was filed. The insurance policy was the centerpiece. A whole life policy taken out through a regional carrier called Cumberland Mutual, purchased in 2020, 5 months after I left home. Policyholder, Dale Fairley. Insured, Sutton Fairley. Death benefit, $175,000. Dale had been paying the premiums, $142 per month, for 3 years before filing the claim. He'd planned it. Not impulsively, not desperately, with the slow, calculated patience of a man who managed a used car lot and knew how to make the numbers work. He took out the policy after I left, when he knew I wouldn't be around to discover it. He waited 3 years, long enough for the policy's contestability period to expire. Then he filed the death certificate, submitted the claim, and collected the money. Cumberland Mutual paid out $175,000 in June of the previous year. The check was deposited into a joint account held by Dale and Noreen Fairley at First Bank of Bledsoe County. And here's the detail that made Iris close her eyes and press her fingers against the bridge of her nose for 10 full seconds. My parents held a memorial service at Grace Fellowship Church on Elm Street in Pikeville. Noreen, in her capacity as the church secretary, arranged it. 34 people attended. They mourned a woman who was alive and answering 911 calls 45 minutes away. "They grieved you," Iris said quietly. "Publicly, in front of the community. Your mother organized flowers." I sat in Iris's office, a small room with a metal desk and a window that looked out onto a parking lot, and I felt something I don't have a word for. Not anger, not grief. Something beneath both. The sensation of being erased by the people who created you, and finding out about it from a government clerk and a legal aid lawyer while sitting in plastic chairs under fluorescent lights. "What do we do?" I asked. Iris opened a fresh legal pad. "First, we petition to revoke the death certificate. Second, we file a criminal complaint, insurance fraud, filing false documents, identity fraud. Third, and this is the part I think matters most to you, we make sure you walk into whatever courtroom this ends up in, alive, in person, and undeniable." "When?" "The preliminary hearing is in 6 weeks. Bledsoe County Courthouse. Your parents will be there, the prosecutor will be there, and you will be there. Living, breathing proof that the woman they buried never died." The 6 weeks between my visit to Iris's office and the court hearing were the strangest of my life. I was alive, provably alive, but the systems around me treated me like a ghost. My social security number was frozen, my credit was suspended, my bank flagged my account for irregular activity because a dead person was making deposits. I had to carry a folder of documents everywhere I went: birth certificate, state ID, a notarized affidavit from Iris confirming my living status, just to function as a person. The apartment application was denied. The landlord wasn't willing to wait for the legal process to resolve. "I'm sorry," he said on the phone. "It's nothing personal. I just can't lease to someone the system says doesn't exist." Doesn't exist. I went to work that night and answered 12 911 calls. A car accident on I-40. A child with a seizure on Merchant Drive. A woman in a parking lot who thought she was having a heart attack. It was a panic attack, but I stayed on the line with her for 11 minutes until the ambulance arrived. I guided people through the worst moments of their lives, while the state of Tennessee had me filed under deceased. Iris worked fast. She filed the petition to revoke the death certificate within a week. She contacted the Bledsoe County District Attorney's Office and presented the evidence. Me, alive, plus the financial trail connecting Dale to the insurance payout and Harlan Creed's $9,000 payment. The DA, a woman named Patricia Engel, opened an investigation. "This is unusual," Patricia told Iris on a conference call I sat in on. "We've had insurance fraud cases, we've had false document filings, but I've never had a case where the deceased walks into my office and introduces herself." "First time for everything," Iris said. While the legal process moved, I did my own digging. Not because Iris asked me to, because I needed to understand the full architecture of what my parents had built. I needed to see every beam and joint of the lie, the way you need to see the entire blueprint of a building before you can understand which wall is load-bearing and which one is decoration. I started with the memorial service. A dispatcher I worked with, a woman named Keely Briggs, 31, who'd become the closest thing I had to a friend in Knoxville, helped me search online. We found a post on the Grace Fellowship Church Facebook page from April of the previous year. A photo of a table with flowers, a framed picture of me, my senior yearbook photo, and a sign that read, "In loving memory of Sutton Dale Fairley, 2001 to 2023. Gone too soon." Noreen had written the caption. "Our sweet girl has gone home to be with the Lord. We are heartbroken beyond words. Thank you to our Grace Fellowship family for your love and prayers during this unimaginable time." 47 reactions, 22 comments. People I'd grown up with, Sunday school teachers, neighbors, Noreen's church friends, writing things like, "Praying for your family," and "She was such a bright light," and "God has a plan even when we can't see it." Keely was sitting beside me when I read the comments. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Your mother wrote that caption while you were alive. She typed the word heartbroken while you were answering 911 calls." "I know. Are you okay?" "No, but I'm functional. Right now, functional is enough." Keely became my second anchor during those weeks, not in the way Iris was. Iris was legal, strategic, precise. Keely was human. She brought me coffee at the start of every shift. She sat with me in the parking lot after work when the weight of it got too heavy for the driver's seat. She didn't try to fix anything. She just stayed close. "I aged out of foster care at 18, Keely told me one night, both of us sitting on the hood of her car in the dispatch center parking lot. "No family, no safety net. I know what it's like to have the people who were supposed to protect you be the people you need protection from. It's a specific kind of alone." A specific kind of alone. She was right. It wasn't the loneliness of having nobody. It was the loneliness of having people who were supposed to be somebody and choosing not to be. Iris obtained the insurance claim file from Cumberland Mutual through a legal subpoena. The file contained the death certificate, Dale's claim application, and a copy of the policy itself. But it also contained something I didn't expect, a beneficiary designation form. The primary beneficiary on the policy was Dale Fairley. The contingent beneficiary was Noreen Fairley. But there was a third line on the form, a space for an additional insured party notification. And in that space, Dale had written a name, Cody Fairley, my brother. Cody knew. Or at minimum, Cody was listed on the paperwork. He was part of the financial structure even if he didn't understand the fraud. He was 20 years old, still living in Pikeville, still working at the car lot, still orbiting Dale like a smaller planet around a larger one. I didn't call Cody. I didn't know what I'd say. "Did you know our parents declared me dead?" Isn't a question that fits into any conversation I know how to have. Iris also pulled the financial records from the joint account at First Bank of Bledsoe County. The $175,000 had been deposited in June. Within 4 months, $93,000 had been spent. A new truck for Dale, renovations on the Dayton Avenue house, a vacation to Gulf Shores, Alabama that Noreen had posted about on Facebook with the caption, "Blessed beyond measure." Blessed beyond measure. With the money from their daughter's fake death. Posted on social media for the same community that had attended my memorial. The remaining $82,000 sat in the account, untouched since October. Iris suspected Dale was waiting to invest it, probably in the car lot, probably in a way that would be difficult to trace. "He's patient," she said. "He waited 3 years to file the claim. He'll wait to move the rest of the money." "He's not patient," I said. "He's calculating. There's a difference." Iris looked at me, then she nodded. "You're right. There is." The Bledsoe County preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in September. The charges: insurance fraud, filing a false death certificate, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Both Dale and Noreen were named. Harlan Creed had been offered a cooperation deal and had agreed to testify that Dale paid him to sign as a witness to a drowning that never happened. Iris called me 3 days before the hearing. "The prosecutor wants you there, not just as a complainant, as a witness. You'll be called to testify. But before that, you'll need to enter the courtroom, and when you do, your parents will see you." "I know." "Have you thought about what that's going to feel like?" "Every day for 6 weeks. And?" I thought about the pressed penny, the butterfly stamped into copper, the one day at Dollywood when Dale Fairley was a father instead of a manager. I thought about Noreen's Facebook caption, "Gone home to be with the Lord," typed with the same fingers that used to braid my hair before church. "It's going to feel like walking back from the dead," I said, because that's exactly what it is. Iris Chaplin's office was on the 3rd floor of a building on Gay Street that smelled like old carpet and copier toner. Her desk was metal, government surplus, covered in case files organized with colored tabs. She had one personal item in the office, a framed photo of herself at her law school graduation, standing alone, holding her diploma with both hands, nobody beside her. I asked her about it once. She looked at the photo and said, "That's the only graduation picture I have. No family came. I aged out of foster care at 18 with a garbage bag of clothes and a GED. I put myself through undergrad and law school on scholarships and stubbornness. That picture reminds me that the people who were supposed to show up didn't, and I showed up anyway." Iris understood me in a way that didn't require explanation. She didn't need me to describe what it felt like to be treated as an asset by your own parents. She knew. Not the same story, but the same language. The language of people who learned early that the adults in the room were not safe. The week before the hearing, we met 4 times. Each meeting was preparation, not just legal, but emotional. Iris knew that walking into a courtroom and facing the parents who declared you dead wasn't a standard legal proceeding. It was a resurrection. And resurrections are disorienting for everyone in the room. "The prosecutor, Patricia Engel, will call you as a witness," Iris explained during our Tuesday session. "You'll be asked to confirm your identity, describe your estrangement from your parents, and explain how you discovered the death certificate. Straightforward, factual." "And my parents?" "They'll be at the defense table. Dale's attorney is a man named Roy Burkhart, local, been practicing in Bledsoe County for 30 years. He handles DUIs and property disputes mostly. This is probably the biggest case he's ever had." "Will they know I'm coming?" "The prosecution listed you as a witness, but witness lists don't always get reviewed carefully by defense counsel in preliminary hearings. And even if Roy Burkhart told your parents a witness named Sutton Fairley was on the list, They filed a death certificate for you. They might assume it's a clerical error, or they might assume it's someone testifying about you, not that you're testifying yourself. She paused, clicked her pen. Iris had the same habit as every investigator I'd ever seen, the pen-clicking rhythm of a person processing. The moment you walk through that door, the case changes. You're not just evidence. You're the evidence. A living, breathing refutation of everything they filed. The judge will see you. The gallery will see you. And your parents will see the daughter they told the state of Tennessee was dead, standing 10 feet away from them. What do I say? Patricia will ask you questions. Answer them honestly. Don't embellish. Don't editorialize. The facts are devastating enough without decoration. She leaned forward. But there's also the possibility of a victim impact statement. If the judge allows it, and I believe he will, you'll have the chance to speak directly, not to your parents, to the court, about what this did to you. How long? 2 to 3 minutes, no more. Short is powerful, long is diluted. I spent 3 nights writing the statement, not at home, at the dispatch center, between calls, in the break room at 2 a.m. with a legal pad and a pen I kept borrowing from Keely's desk. I wrote and rewrote. I crossed out sentences that sounded angry and replaced them with sentences that sounded true. There's a difference. Anger is loud. Truth is specific. Keely read the final draft on the night before the hearing. She sat in the break room chair with her feet tucked under her, and she read it twice. Then she looked up and said, "This is going to wreck that courtroom." I don't want to wreck anything. I just want to exist again. That's what's going to wreck them. The fact that you're not trying to destroy them. You're just trying to be alive. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in my apartment on Western Avenue with Dispatch the cat curled against my leg, and I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about the pressed penny. I'd left it on the dresser in my childhood bedroom 4 years ago. It was probably still there, or thrown away, or buried in a drawer, or sitting on a shelf in a house that had been renovated with money from my fake death. The butterfly, the word Dollywood, the warm copper in my 8-year-old palm. I thought about what that penny represented. Not the day at Dollywood. The day itself was real, but it was 1 day in 18 years. What the penny represented was the version of my father I wanted to believe in. The Dale who bought funnel cake and rode the scrambler and handed me quarters without calculating the return. That Dale existed for 1 afternoon. The other Dale, the one who put me on a payroll I didn't work, inflated his income on my back, took out a life insurance policy on his estranged daughter, and filed a death certificate with her name on it. That Dale existed for the other 17 years and 364 days. I had spent years grieving the first Dale. Tomorrow, I was going to face the second one. I got up at 5 a.m., I showered, I put on a gray blazer and black pants, professional, unremarkable, the clothes of a person who shows up to things that matter. I drank coffee standing at the counter. I fed Dispatch. I picked up the folder of documents Iris had prepared, my ID, my birth certificate, the Social Security records, the affidavit of living status. Keely texted me at 6:15. "I'm driving you, non-negotiable." I didn't argue. Some things are better not done alone. And the 90-minute drive to Pikeville, back down the road I'd traveled in the opposite direction 4 years ago with a duffel bag and $400, was one of them. We drove south on I-40, then east through the plateau. The trees were starting to turn. The mountains were blue-gray in the early light. Keely didn't play music. She didn't make small talk. She just drove, steady and quiet, the way you drive someone to something important. We pulled into the Bledsoe County Courthouse parking lot at 8:47 a.m. The hearing was at 9:30. The courthouse was a 2-story brick building on Main Street, the kind of building that looks like it was built to outlast everything around it. American flag, stone steps, double doors with brass handles. I sat in the car for 1 minute. Keely put her hand on my arm. "You're alive, Sutton. That's the whole argument. You just have to walk in there and be alive." I picked up my folder. I opened the car door, and I walked toward the courthouse where my parents were waiting to be tried for killing a woman who was about to walk through the front door. The Bledsoe County Courthouse smelled like floor wax and old wood and the particular staleness of a building that processes human failure 5 days a week. The hallway was narrow, scuffed linoleum, fluorescent lights, a bulletin board with notices about jury duty, and probation schedules pinned under yellowed plastic. A metal detector at the entrance, staffed by a deputy who looked like he'd been doing the job since before I was born. I walked through the detector. Keeley followed. We turned left toward courtroom B, the larger of the 2 courtrooms, assigned for preliminary hearings. The door was closed. A bailiff stood beside it, checking names against a list. "Sutton Fairley," I said. "I'm a listed witness." He scanned the list, found my name, looked at me, looked at the list again. Then he opened the door. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. 4 rows of gallery benches on each side, separated by a center aisle. Judge's bench at the front, elevated, dark wood. Prosecution table on the left. Defense table on the right. An American flag in the corner. A clock on the wall that read 9:17 a.m. The gallery was about half full, maybe 30 people. Some I didn't recognize. Legal staff, courthouse regulars, people with no connection to the case. But some I did. Mrs. Linden, who taught my Sunday school class at Grace Fellowship. Bobby Draper, who owned the hardware store on Main Street and used to give me free penny candy when I was little. Tammy Royce, Noreen's best friend from the church choir, sitting in the 3rd row with a tissue already in her hand. These people had attended my memorial. They had mourned me. They had eaten casserole in the church fellowship hall and told my mother they were praying for her and gone home believing that Dale and Noreen Fairley had lost their daughter to a drowning accident. And now they were sitting in a courtroom because the state of Tennessee was charging those same parents with fraud. I didn't look at the defense table yet. I walked to the prosecution side and sat in the front row of the gallery beside Keeley. Iris was already at the prosecution table with Patricia Engel, a tall woman in her 50s with reading glasses and the particular posture of someone who has spent decades standing in courtrooms and doesn't waste energy on nervousness. Then I looked at the defense table. My father sat on the right. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen, dark blue, too tight across the shoulders, the suit of a man who doesn't own suits and bought one for the occasion. His hair was grayer than I remembered. He was leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, talking to his attorney, Roy Burkhart, a heavy-set man with a red face and a briefcase that looked older than me. My mother sat on the left, navy dress, pearl earrings. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the table in front of her, not speaking. She looked smaller than the last time I'd seen her, not physically, structurally, like the framework that held her upright had lost a few critical supports. Neither of them had seen me yet. The bailiff called the court to order at 9:30 exactly. Judge Harold Meacham, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that carried authority without volume, entered and took the bench. Case number 2024-CR-0187, State of Tennessee versus Dale Raymond Fairley and Noreen Beth Fairley. Charges: insurance fraud, filing a false instrument, conspiracy to commit fraud. This is a preliminary hearing to determine probable cause. Ms. Engel, is the prosecution ready? We are, Your Honor. Mr. Burkhart. Ready, Your Honor. Proceed. Patricia Engel stood. She gave a brief opening summary: the charges, the false death certificate, the $175,000 payout, the cooperation of witness Harlan Creed. She spoke for 4 minutes. Clear, methodical, no dramatics. Then she said, "The prosecution calls its first witness, Sutton Fairley." I stood up. The room didn't gasp. That's a movie thing. What happened was quieter and worse. A ripple moved through the gallery. The sound of 30 people processing the same impossible information simultaneously. Chairs creaking, breath catching. A whisper from somewhere in the back that sounded like the word Lord. I walked to the front of the courtroom. I passed the center aisle. I passed the bar. I stepped up to the witness stand. I raised my right hand. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down. And I looked at my parents. Dale saw me first. His crossed arms dropped. His hands went flat on the table. His mouth opened, not to speak, but in the involuntary way a mouth opens when the brain receives information it cannot categorize. He stared at me with an expression I can only describe as system failure. The face of a man whose entire scheme was predicated on the assumption that the person he'd erased would stay erased. Noreen looked up 3 seconds after Dale. Her gaze moved from the table to the witness stand, and when it landed on me, her face crumpled. Not dramatically, inward, like a structure collapsing in on itself. Her hands, still folded in her lap, began to shake. Her lips moved but produced no sound. Roy Burkhart looked at Dale, looked at me, looked at Dale again. Then he leaned toward his client and said something I couldn't hear, but could read on his face. The expression of an attorney realizing his case has just been detonated from the inside. In the gallery, Mrs. Linden pressed both hands over her mouth. Bobby Draper leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at me like I'd materialized from thin air. Tammy Royce, Noreen's best friend, the woman with the tissue, turned and looked at Noreen with an expression that traveled from confusion to recognition to something that looked like nausea. Judge Meacham looked at me over his wire-rimmed glasses. His expression was controlled, but I saw his eyebrows rise a fraction, the judicial equivalent of shock. "State your full name for the record," Patricia said. "Sutton Dale Fairley." "Date of birth?" "September 14th, 2001. "Ms. Fairley, are you the individual named on the death certificate filed in Bledsoe County on April 3rd, 2023? "I am." "And are you in fact deceased?" "No, ma'am, I am not." A sound moved through the gallery. Not laughter, something more primal. The sound of absurdity colliding with reality. The sound of 30 people hearing a living woman confirm that she's alive in response to a legal question about her death. "Can you describe how you discovered the death certificate had been filed?" I told them. The apartment application, the flagged social security number, the visit to the SSA office, Donna, the clerk, the screen showing my date of death. I kept my voice steady. I used specific details, dates, names, times, the way Iris had taught me. Facts are devastating enough without decoration. "Did you authorize anyone to file a death certificate in your name?" "No." "Were you aware that a life insurance policy had been taken out in your name?" "No. I learned about it through the investigation." "When did you last have contact with your parents?" 4 years ago. I left home at 19 and went no contact. I moved to Knoxville. I changed my phone number. I had no communication with either of them from that point forward." "And during those 4 years, were you alive, employed, and functioning as a citizen?" "Yes. I've been employed as an emergency medical dispatcher at the Knox County 911 Center for 3 years. I file taxes, I pay rent, I vote. I have been continuously alive and present in Knox County since the date on that death certificate." Patricia nodded. She let the silence hold. Then she turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution has no further questions for this witness at this time. We would request, however, that Ms. Fairley be permitted to deliver a brief victim impact statement." Judge Meacham looked at Roy Burkhart. "Any objection?" Burkhart glanced at Dale. Dale was staring at the table. Noreen was crying silently, mascara running in 2 thin lines down her cheeks. "No objection, Your Honor," Burkhart said quietly. The voice of a man who knows when to stop fighting. "Ms. Fairley," Judge Meacham said, "you may address the court." I took one breath. I looked at the gallery. Mrs. Linden, Bobby Draper, Tammy Royce, the faces of people who had attended my memorial and were now sitting in a courtroom watching me breathe. I looked at Iris, who nodded once. I looked at Keely, in the front row of the gallery, her hands clasped tight in her lap, her eyes steady on mine. Then I spoke. "Your Honor, I'm not going to talk about the money.
The prosecutors will handle that. And I'm not going to talk about the legal process of being declared dead. My attorney has documented every step of what that's taken from me and what it takes to get it back. I paused. I want to talk about one day. When I was 8 years old, my father took me to Dollywood, just the two of us. He bought me a funnel cake. He rode the scrambler with me twice. At the end of the day, he gave me 52 cents, a penny and 2 quarters, so I could press a souvenir penny at a machine near the exit. The penny had a butterfly on it. I kept it in my wallet for 11 years.
The courtroom was completely still. That's the only day I can remember where my father treated me like a daughter instead of an asset. One day out of 18 years. I've replayed it thousands of times. I've tried to make it mean more than it does. But one day doesn't outweigh 17 years of being managed, documented, and financially exploited. And it definitely doesn't outweigh being declared dead so your parents can collect $175,000. Dale's head was bowed. His hands were still flat on the table. He hadn't moved since I'd taken the stand. My mother organized a memorial service for me at Grace Fellowship Church. 34 people came. They said I was a bright light. They said God had a plan. My mother accepted their hugs and their casseroles and their prayers, and she did it knowing I was alive. She did it knowing I was 45 minutes away, answering 911 calls, saving other people's lives while she was performing grief over mine. Noreen's shoulders shook. Tammy Royce, sitting behind her in the gallery, was staring at the back of Noreen's head with tears running down her own face. Not sympathy tears anymore, something rawer. I'm a dispatcher. I answer the phone when people are dying. Real dying. I've heard last breaths. I've heard mothers screaming. I've heard the silence after someone doesn't make it. I know what death sounds like. I paused. And I know what it sounds like when someone uses it as a business strategy. Bobby Draper in the gallery lowered his head into his hands. Mrs. Linden was crying without sound, her hands still over her mouth. I'm alive. That's the only thing I need the court to know. I'm alive and I've been alive, and the death certificate filed by my parents is a lie. The same kind of lie they built my entire childhood on. The lie that I existed for their benefit. The lie that my value was financial. The lie that when I stopped being useful, I could be discarded, or in this case, killed on paper and cashed in. I stopped. I looked at Judge Meacham. His glasses had slipped slightly down his nose. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, but underneath the judicial composure, I saw something human. Something that looked like a man who had heard a lot of cases and didn't hear this one without feeling it. "Thank you, Ms. Fairley," he said. "You may step down." I stepped down from the witness stand. I walked past the prosecution table. I walked past the defense table. I did not look at my parents. Not because I was afraid, because there was nothing left to see. The Dale who gave me a penny at Dollywood and the Dale who filed my death certificate were the same man. And I'd already said goodbye to both of them. The first when I left at 19, the second just now, from the witness stand. As I passed the defense table, Noreen reached out, her hand extended across the gap between the table and the aisle, fingers trembling, mascara-streaked face turned toward me, mouth forming a word that might have been my name. I didn't stop. I didn't take her hand. I walked past it the way you walk past a door you've already closed. Her hand hung in the air for a moment, then returned to her lap. Healy was standing when I reached the gallery. She didn't hug me. She just put her hand on my back. Firm, steady. The hand of a person who knows the difference between comfort and collapse, and walked me out of the courtroom. The last thing I heard before the doors closed behind me was Judge Meacham's voice. "The court finds probable cause to proceed on all charges. Trial date to be set within 60 days. Dale and Noreen were indicted the following month. 3 counts each: insurance fraud, filing a false instrument, conspiracy. Harlan Creed pleaded guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for testimony. Roy Burkhart attempted to negotiate a plea deal. The DA's office rejected the first offer. As of now, the case is pending trial. I don't follow it closely. Iris sends me updates when something moves. I read them, I file them, and I go back to my shift. The legal system will do what it does. My job was to walk into that courtroom and be alive. I did that. The rest belongs to the courts. Cumberland Mutual filed a civil suit to recover the $175,000. The $82,000 still in Dale's account was frozen immediately. The remaining $93,000, spent on a truck, house renovations, and a vacation to Gulf Shores, will be harder to recover. Dale may lose the Dayton Avenue house. Noreen may lose more than that. I don't know what their lives look like now. I don't ask. Cody called me 2 weeks after the hearing. I hadn't given him my number. He'd gotten it from Iris's office, called the legal aid line and said he was my brother and needed to reach me. The receptionist, against protocol, passed along the message. I thought about ignoring it. Then I called back. Sutton. His voice was thin, younger than 20, the voice of a boy who had lived in Dale's orbit his entire life and was now watching that orbit collapse. Hi, Cody. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what they did. Dad told me you died. He said it was an accident. I went to the memorial. I cried, Sutton. I actually cried. I believed him. Not because his words were convincing. Words in my family were never trustworthy. Because his voice was the voice of someone who had genuinely grieved. You can't fake that particular rawness. I know. I listen to real grief for a living. Your name was on the insurance paperwork, Cody. Silence. Long. Dad added me as a beneficiary. He told me it was a standard thing, said if anything happened to him, I'd be covered. I didn't read the documents. I just signed. That sounded like Dale. Paperwork as a weapon, signatures as tools. Cody had been managed the same way I'd been managed. The difference was that Cody never noticed the machinery because he never stopped to look at it. I need time, I said. I'm not angry at you, but I need time before I can be your sister again. Okay. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I know. I hung up. I don't know if Cody and I will rebuild something. Maybe. He's young enough to still become someone different from what that house made him. But I'm not responsible for that transformation. I've spent enough years being managed by Fairleys. I'm not managing another one, even with good intentions. Mrs. Linden from Sunday school sent me a card, handwritten. It said, I am so deeply sorry. I grieved for you and I should have questioned more. Your mother was very convincing. I'm glad you're alive, Sutton. I mean that with everything I have. Bobby Draper left a voicemail. He didn't say much, just that he remembered the penny candy and that he was glad I was still around to remember it too. His voice was gruff and unsteady, and I saved the message. Tammy Royce, Noreen's best friend, did not reach out. I don't know what she's processing. I don't need to know. 3 weeks after the hearing, I drove to Pigeon Forge on a Saturday, alone. 90 minutes through the mountains with the windows down and no radio, just the sound of wind and distance. I parked at Dollywood at 10 a.m. I bought a ticket. I walked through the gates into the park I hadn't visited in 15 years. It was smaller than I remembered. The scrambler was still there, repainted, but the same ride. The funnel cake stand had moved to a different section. The trees were taller. Everything was the same and nothing was the same, which is how memory works when you go back to a place that only exists perfectly in your mind. I found the pressed penny machine near the exit. Same spot, same design options. The butterfly was still one of the choices. I put in a penny and 2 quarters. I turned the crank. The machine hummed. The penny came out flat and warm. The butterfly stamped fresh into bright copper. I held it in my palm. 23 years old, standing in the same spot where I'd stood at 8, holding the same kind of penny, feeling the same weight in my hand. But the girl who pressed the first penny was looking up at her father and believing in the version of him that existed for one afternoon. The woman pressing the second penny was looking at the mountain ridge line above the park and believing in herself. Both pennies sit on my nightstand now, side by side. The old one, I retrieved it from the Dayton Avenue house after the hearing when Dale and Noreen were ordered to surrender certain personal effects during the investigation. It was still on the dresser in my old bedroom, face up, butterfly showing, exactly where I'd left it 4 years ago. The old penny is dull, oxidized. The butterfly is fading into the copper, almost invisible unless you tilt it toward the light. The new penny is bright, sharp. The butterfly is clean and clear. I look at them every morning before my shift. 2 pennies, 2 versions of the same machine, the same design, the same girl standing in the same spot, 15 years apart. The first one was pressed by a daughter who wanted to believe her father loved her. The second one was pressed by a woman who stopped needing him to. My name is Sutton Fairley. I'm 23 years old. I am alive. I answer the phone when people are dying and I keep them breathing until help arrives. My parents declared me dead for $175,000. And I walked into a courtroom and proved them wrong by doing the simplest, most undeniable thing a person can do. I showed up. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't. And if you've ever been written off by a parent, a system, a person who was supposed to protect you, and you survived it, tell me in the comments. I want to know you're out there. I want to know you showed up too.